10 team, 3 wide receiver, Superflex, half PPR mock draft. Going to be using FantasyPros this time. Typically, we've been using Sleeper, but some of Sleeper's ADPs have been a little bit funky, at least this point in the offseason. We'll go ahead and randomize the draft position, got the 3 pick. And what I did for this as well is I put the positional value of the quarterback a little bit lower just because it is a 10-team league. And the wide receiver position a little bit higher because it is 3 wide receiver. All else kind of remains the same. So let's get this kicked off. So the first 2 picks right off the bat, Josh Allen and Jamar Chase, pretty much what would be expected, especially in a 10-team format. Now, if this was 12-team, we would probably see either Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels go at the 2. But one of the things that we try to stress so much with 10-team formats is there are so many more quarterbacks to go around, whereas in 12-team, there's obviously 24 quarterbacks that are starting each week. But the biggest difference really is in 10-team, each team has 3 quarterbacks that they can roster that are active, versus 12-team where you can kind of get pinched a little bit. So looking at my board here, I've got Lamar Jackson as my number 2 quarterback. I have Jaden Daniels as my number 3. They're all in the similar tier. We just did an in-depth quarterback ranking episode where we had Jaden Daniels as kind of a little mini tier of his own. Really the only reason with that is the longevity that we've seen with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson year over year. My top ranked wide receiver would be Justin Jefferson. So for me, being that it is Superflex and 3 wide receiver, it's really between those 2 players. So since my next pick is going to be pick 18, let's check out their current ADPs and see what type of player I should expect to get there, because that'll make a difference as to whether I go Lamar or Jefferson. So we're looking at Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, CD, CD, very unlikely to make it back to me, but I could get Amon-Ra or Malik Neighbors. So both players I really like there as well. But let's go ahead and take Lamar Jackson here and see what happens. All right, so next pick's off the board. Of course, Justin Jefferson goes right after me. Brian Thomas, that's a little bit early, but we talked about Brian Thomas in the Breakouts episode with the potential to have the number 1 overall ceiling. So really, really like him for this year. Bijan, Jaden Daniels, CeeDee Lamb. A little run on quarterbacks there, and then followed by Gibbs, Saquon, St. Brown, Puka, and Malik Neighbors. Because I took Lamar, I'll probably employ more of like a hero quarterback approach, just because there are so many good quarterbacks this year that I'm not going to feel the need to reach on any of these guys. Given that there is a tier break and a lot of other running backs that I do like, I'm going to go ahead and take Nico Collins here. All right, next 4 picks, we see Ashton Genty, Kyler Murray, Derrick Henry, and Drake London go off the board. So kind of as expected. Now, I will say Devon Achane is another player that we talked about in our breakouts video, having this potential ceiling to be number 1 running back overall. I know that sounds like quite a bit of a stretch, but at the same time, like, he was just so incredible when Tua was on the field last year. Obviously, the whole offense cratered when Tua was out, and obviously health is a concern for Tua, but you just can't question Achane's overall upside. So he's an interesting one to look at here. Christian McCaffrey, I still have him as my RB4. I think it kind of just depends on your appetite for risk with him. So looking at the team that I've built so far, Lamar has dealt with injury over his career. Nico's dealt with injury over his career. If I go McCaffrey here, that's a pretty risky team. Now, no one is insulated from injury. If I'm looking at the wide receiver position, you can make the same case about AJ Brown. You can make the same case at the running back position about Jonathan Taylor, and so on and so forth. So for me, I will go ahead and take a little bit of a swing here and draft Christian McCaffrey. I think come August, we're going to see his ADP climb quite a bit. So this will probably end up being a very good value. Now, at the same time, if we get negative reports and things like that, we can see his ADP crater. But I've noticed in best ball, he's starting to slowly climb up the board. So let's go ahead and lock in McCaffrey here, have 3 alphas at their respective positions. I've started quarterback, wide receiver, and running back. It definitely leaves me a lot of options here. Now, I would have loved for Trey McBride to make it back to me here. Brock Bowers was probably a little bit unrealistic to expect to make it to me, but at the same time, one of the great things about Superflex, and especially 10-team Superflex, is so many of these great players, their value gets pushed down so much when there's a run on quarterbacks. We just did a video kind of preaching why we believe Superflex is the best format for fantasy football. And really, that's the reason that we started this channel in the first place. And one of those caveats, or I'm sorry, and one of those key points was the fact that every draft is so random. We've been playing in our home league in Superflex specifically for over 10 years, and we really never know what to expect come draft day. So it makes it quite a bit of fun. But unfortunately, I'm not going to be getting one of those 2 tight ends. Maybe I'll target Kittle a little bit later. But this leaves me in an interesting position here because there's a bunch of quarterbacks that I really like. So definitely not going to take one here, because even if I decide to take one in round 5, I know one of those guys will make it back to me. Kyren Williams, Chase Brown, Breece Hall, James Cook. This is an interesting tier of running back that I'm kind of struggling with right now. The Kyren, the Chase Brown tier, and really Breece Hall to some extent too. It's easy to knock Kyren because he's smaller. He's not super fast. We were doing it last year when the reports were coming out that he was going to be the punt returner, or he was working on punt returns. They just drafted Blake Corum, who obviously was coming off a great year at Michigan. But I think it turns out that Corum was kind of the Kyren insurance, and Corum just ended up being a lesser version of Kyren, which is why he didn't necessarily see the field a whole bunch. Now, what I struggle with Kyren is the fact that they drafted Jarquez Hunter. I think he brings an element of explosiveness that Sean McVay covets. I'm sure you guys have seen the video of, when they drafted Hunter and they traded up for him, and McVay was very stoked on that. So, Kyren is McVay's favorite player, so there's definitely that element to it, but Hunter scares me a little bit. And Chase Brown, he survived the draft. A lot of people were assuming that Cincinnati was going to pounce on, one of the running backs, and they did take Taj Brooks late, who I think is a pretty solid player in his own right, but really the draft capital is a little bit concerning with him. But I'm going to go T. Higgins here. Obviously coming off a great year. He had 15 and a half PPR points per game, which is just outstanding. Obviously Jamar Chase set the pace at, I believe it was 20. But Higgins, he struggled with health over the years, and that was kind of one of the reasons, we knocked him down a little bit last year, but cannot doubt his upside. And again, sticking with the theme of building a very risky team here. Next 4 picks, Drake May, Mike Evans, Tyreek Hill, Kyren Williams. Okay, so Drake May is someone I really like this year. I have him as my quarterback 9. Caleb Williams is still on the board. I have him as my QB 8. I just have really high hopes for Caleb this year. I love the talent. I love the playmakers. I love the fact that they went out and got Ben Johnson. But again, not necessarily a position of need right now, because I still have Lamar as that anchor. Interesting here. Okay. So I did talk about Chase Brown earlier. Breece Hall, I love Breece Hall as a player. I don't know what the regime is doing. They keep talking about like 3-headed monster, and Fields isn't going to dump it off, and Fields takes so much runway. Cook, he played so well last year, and he just ran so hot on touchdowns. Same with Terry McLaurin, really, too. So I will go ahead and take Chase Brown here. Okay, so my team so far, Lamar, Nico, Christian McCaffrey, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown. Bunch of different ways I can go here. Unfortunately, George Kittle went off the board, so that's someone that I would have absolutely taken. But now for me, this pick is it's so obvious. I mean, Caleb Williams, I probably should have taken him in the last round. I gambled a little bit, and that gamble is going to pay off because I have Dak way down in the teens. I have CJ Stroud way down in the teens. I have Trevor Lawrence, I believe, at QB 19, Stafford, I think QB 20. Tua, I think I have at QB 22, and so on and so forth. So cannot hit draft fast enough. Now let's take a look. How far down is the next tight end? I'm not going to reach on either of those guys. So I'm going to wait at tight end, and I only have 2 wide receivers, Nico Collins and T. Higgins. This is a 3 wide receiver league. I've got 2 good running backs. I can get a bunch of those guys later. So looking at the wide receiver positions, Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton, DK Metcalf, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. I think the pick is Sutton here. Yeah, I really like Zay Flowers, but Zay Flowers is so weird. Like, he just gets game scripted out quicker than any number one wide receiver in the league. Whereas with Cortland Sutton, like we know he's the number one, we know he's an alpha, we know he's kind of ran hot on touchdowns, but that's 2 years in a row where he scored a bunch of touchdowns. They didn't do a whole bunch in the draft. I mean, obviously they drafted RJ Harvey, right? And they still have Mims, they still have Troy Franklin, Vele. They brought in Evan Ingram, but I think Sutton is very clear the number one. And to get a very clear number one at this point in the draft is something I'm not going to pass up on. Okay, so I mentioned previously, double dipping at the wide receiver position with my next couple picks. And I'm definitely going to do that here. Jameson Williams, he's an interesting one, right? Like he kind of broke out last year, but they're losing Ben Johnson. But the new OC was saying, he wants Jameson to break out more. I struggle with that a little bit. I will say you can make the case for it. He's obviously incredibly talented. Loved him in college. I'm sure we all did. For me, Chris Olave is just, he's too good of a player. We can't deny the fact that he has top 15 wide receiver upside in his game. Now we'll see how the mix of Tyler Shuck and Spencer Rattler plays, but even though Carr was like okay for fantasy over his career, and when I say okay, like only if you play Superflex and you needed a reliable QB3, but he and Olave like never had a connection. It just never seemed to fully click. So I'm not saying Shuck, it's going to click with Shuck, but I'm saying in training camp, you're going to be relying on, your alpha wide receiver. We'll see how Shaheed comes back from that injury. This offense is probably not going to be very good, but Olave, just one of my favorite players in the league and someone who hopefully as my wide receiver 4, I can rely on putting him in my lineups a decent amount. Okay, so there are a ton of quarterbacks up here. I'm not going to take my third quarterback at this point. Jameson Williams, I just spent a decent amount of time talking about him. Jordan Addison, really like him. Waddle, I just wish they were using him more. Travis Hunter's an intriguing option. TJ Hawkinson is interesting. Ridley, I kind of like. I think that the running back position, it's starting to look like it's going to drop off a decent amount. So this pick for me is really between Caleb Johnson and Quinshon Judkins. Now, I took Judkins in my rookie draft over Caleb Johnson. I actually traded up to get Judkins. I really like him as a prospect, as a player. I will say the fact that they drafted Dylan Sampson does scare me a little bit for this year. And the fact that it is the Cleveland Browns and they're kind of a dumpster fire scares me a little bit. So while Quinshon profiles as a potential workhorse, I think what they're going to try to do is a little bit more of the Ohio State model that we saw last year with Travion Henderson, but I definitely could be wrong about that. But right now, I've just been watching a ton of Caleb Johnson film and highlights and reviews and reports that I'm kind of just fixated on him at this point. I think he joins the perfect system. I think what Arthur Smith wants to do is run the ball. Obviously, he wants to use his zone run scheme, and that's what Caleb Johnson fits into perfectly. There's a lot of touches that are gone with Najee, and we would not expect Jalen Warren's role to change much at all. They're definitely going to be using Warren in the passing game. They're really going to rely on him in pass protection, but assuming all else remains the same, I think Caleb Johnson has a golden opportunity this year, and he's someone I'm going to be targeting heavily. So I still need a tight end. I really like Hawk. I really like Njoku. Both of those guys will probably be there with my next pick. So let me go ahead and look at different positions. And even if Hawkinson's not there, I'm very happy with Njoku, especially if, really only if Flacco is the starting quarterback. Now at the wide receiver position, Debo joins a new team. Juwan Jennings can get you off to a really hot start. If Brandon Ayuk starts the season on the PUP list and Jennings it's hard to say the number one because that might be Kittle. Pearsall could break out, but we've seen Jennings be able to score in bunches. Love Jacoby Myers, Jaden Reed, very talented player. So there's a bunch of wide receivers that I like here. So I'm going to flip what I said on its head, and I will take Hawk and then just pounce on one of those wide receivers. Scadaboo's gone. Dang it. I thought I could get him later. I'm going to go with Jacoby Myers here. He's someone that we've spent a ton of talking about on this podcast, just consistently underrated. Always finishes top 30, always is drafted way outside of that. They did add Jack Besh, who I think is a nice player, but I think he's more of a compliment than someone that's going to threaten to take over being the number one wide receiver. Obviously, we know Bowers is the alpha in this offense. They're going to want to run the ball more, but Jacoby Myers is getting a quarterback upgrade. He didn't drop any passes last year, and he's just a consistent, reliable starter. That's great to have as your fourth wide receiver. Okay, so now we have 4 picks left to make in this draft. We've got 3 running backs, and we've got 5 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 2 quarterbacks. So this is going to be more about filling out the bench. Cooper Kupp's interesting, right? Because there's a good chance that we see Cooper Kupp go into week 1 and be healthy and get 12 targets, right? Like we saw him get 21 targets last year. Now, I don't think that they're going to be as high volume as Matthew Stafford throwing him the ball, but what I'm getting at here is I think there's a unique opportunity to pick up Cooper Kupp, hope he gets off to a hot start, and then flip him in a trade. Now, if you're in a super savvy league, you're going to say like, hey, everyone's going to think the same thing, right? Like he's older, he has an injury history, but in your more casual home league, Cooper Kupp is such a brand name. Maybe that person had him, when he won the Triple Crown. You get what I'm saying here. So the opportunity to potentially sell high on him is going to be a lot different of an opportunity versus someone like Michael Pittman, who's definitely a floor play. Now, as much of a wide receiver bro as I am, as you can see by this team, I probably need to add a little bit depth at my running back position. And because I took Christian McCaffrey as my first overall, I am going to protect that investment and just make sure I get Isaac Guerendo on my team. There's a chance that Guerendo would make it back to me, but I'm not willing to take that risk whatsoever. Now, I will say here, I don't know, for whatever reason, whether we do these mocks on Sleeper or on FantasyPros, the computer just refuses to take a third quarterback. And all of these guys here would be gone by this pick. So I'm just going to follow the computer's trend and just take 2 quarterbacks, because that's a little bit silly to say you're going to get CJ Stroud in the 14th round of a Superflex league. Keon Coleman, I would love Keon Coleman, but that wide receiver room is so crowded. Let's go with Mooney. We saw him have a solid season last year. Hopefully Penix is an upgrade at the quarterback position. We know he can spin it really well. We know he can throw it deep where Mooney can thrive. So definitely a nice late round dart throw. Now, I should probably get another running back. Let's see if there's any flyers that I like, specifically rookies. Samson's interesting because, I talked about liking him a lot as a prospect, but the problem is he's going to be blocked. So I don't know if I want to go with that route. Devin Neal's interesting. With Devin Neal, I really like him as a prospect. That's just more so insurance for Alvin Kamara. So if you are a Kamara owner, I would lock up Neal. Estime, no. Ollie Gordon, no. Jaleel McLaughlin, no. Kendra Miller, no. Giddens, another interesting backup. Kareem Hunt. Man, there's just not a lot of guys here actually available. The only person I like in this range really is Kyle Monangai. Kyle Monangai, the Bears, we all expected to attack the running back position in the draft, and the draft did not fall that way to them. I like to think that they would have gone Travion Henderson over Luther Burden, but Henderson got picked right in front of them. So they just kind of let the draft play out as it did, and they drafted Kyle Monangai late, and he is a bruiser. I think he can play the David Montgomery role. He's an excellent pass protector. He doesn't fumble the ball. He really plays the way, think of like a Dan Campbell style running back. And that's Kyle Monangai. And if that sounds familiar, you know obviously why. So I'll go with him here. Definitely someone I've been taking a lot of shots on late in best ball. So FantasyPros gave me an A-. That's usually a good thing. Anytime you score like a 99, it's really bad because you're just auto drafting on the computer. Anytime you score in the 70s, maybe you reached a little bit too much. It's way different with ESPN. ESPN, if you get like a D, that means you did really well. But I digress. So final starting lineup, Lamar Jackson, obviously we know has QB1 upside. Christian McCaffrey, RB1 upside. Chase Brown survived the draft, is on an elite offense. I'm definitely not as in on him as maybe a lot of other people are this year, but I can't doubt where he fell. Nico, T, Cortland. A pretty good trio, definitely some risk there. Don't love that. TJ Hawkinson is my tight end, great player. Olave is my flex, Caleb Williams, and then I've got some bench pieces that I really like. Love Caleb Johnson, Jacoby Myers. When I draft these riskier, injury-prone wide receivers like T. Higgins specifically or Nico Collins, having someone like Jacoby Myers on my team is someone I feel like I will hold on to and will give me some stability. Cooper Kupp, again, hoping he gets off to a hot start and can sell high on him. Garindo is just RB insurance for McCaffrey, and then Darnell Mooney and Kyle Mungunga. All right, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.